So, in the previous one, we have understood what is SQL, what is a database, what is a database management system, what is an RDBMS, as well as what are various RDBMS platforms which we have in the environment. We know that there is MySQL, there is PostgreSQL, there is Oracle, there is MS SQL, and so on. We will be now understanding SQL with a platform known as MySQL, where we understood certain characteristics of MySQL. We will be now understanding how do we install it, and then let's see how a quick user interface would be gathered for using that tool in order to write certain SQL queries and in order to do certain data analysis with the help of SQL. So, if you can see on my screen, I'll go and install. For the installation, I just have to write MySQL installer. Now, when I go and type in MySQL installer, as you can see that it is showing me certain versions. I'll go and click on the very first over here. Here, you don't need to log in anything. You just have to go on no thanks, just start my download. When you just click on the same, you can see here the download is available. So let me install it over here for you all. As you have to do yes, then yes. So as you can see on the screen, MySQL installer would be helped for installation. So when we have downloaded the installer bit, these are certain versions shown. If I talk upon server only, it is just showing me the server version. That is the server where my data would be kept. But it will not ask or it will not give me an access to write the queries, to write the SQL over here. So I don't need only the server where only my data would be stored. So if I go on the client only option, so it will give me Workbench, a platform to write. It will give me Shell, it will give me router, but it will not give me a server where my data would be stored. So I don't need this as well. If you go on the option of full, you can still and install everything over here which is possibly available in MySQL, or else you can go into the custom option where you'll get lots of option to install as well and customize according to your needs. So let me go and select the custom. I've went. Now MySQL server. As you know that MySQL deals with client-server architecture. Now what's a client-server architecture? Client is my user interface where I'll write certain queries. It will be a platform, it will be a website, and server is where my data would be stored. I do require a MySQL server so that I can keep my data over here and I can gather the responses, request for some data whenever required from the Workbench. Now, Workbench is nothing but a user interface, a platform where I can write my queries. So, let's first see MySQL server. So, if I select it, I've kept it, then applications, I want a Workbench. So Workbench is nothing but it will give me the client interface where I can write my queries, I can write my statements in order to ask for request or response of certain answer or certain data from my database. So I have installed all of them over here. Let me install one by one. Now there is a documentation bit. Now documentation bit will give me documentations of the MySQL platform that I do require, and with this there come samples and examples. Now samples and examples, let's say I am very new to MySQL as a platform, or I'm very new and I've never studied SQL. I don't know what is data, I don't know what is database, I want a pre-created data with me. So MySQL gives you one pre-created data named as Sakila, where you can have lots of tables. They are pre-created, the information is pre-stored. You can just practice upon writing queries and requesting for data so that you can help or you can generate certain reports. So I have samples and examples. Let me select this one. I selected it, enable, and let's go next. With this, I just need to execute it. After executing it, it will take some time for execution. Now MySQL, if there is an error, you just have to go back and next and execute. It will be executed one by one. Now MySQL as a platform is very powerful in the small scale industries where the data is kept on the MySQL servers and they try to access to the data, generate certain responses, get certain queries so that you can eliminate the use of Excel to some extent with the help of MySQL server. Now, as I've said, this is also a standalone software. Now, what's the meaning of standalone? It's standing into my system. It's not somewhere on the clouds or anywhere, it's into my system. So whatever data, whatever query, whatever files which I'll be storing, it will be stored into my system, not on any cloud platform. So I'll go next. Let me execute it. Let us have all the installations which are there. As you can see, all of the things have installed. So let's go next, 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 and next. Your root password you have to keep for your server. So if in order to access your server where the data is being there, in order to write some queries, it will require some password. Now you can decide what password you want to keep. I'll just keep simply 1234 so that it's very easy for me to understand. Why? Because I can take MySQL database and connect it to Python, connect it to Power BI or Tableau at a later instance. And if I forget my root ID or password which is there, it might cause complications for me. So for a betterment, I'm keeping it as simple as possible. But if you wish, you can keep the passwords whatever you want. So 1234 is what I have kept over here. I'll go next, 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 and just let it execute. So as all those steps will be executed, we'll be able to get the MySQL server as well as the workbench installed at our end. These two things are of primary importance for us if we are working in MySQL. So let's finish, next, finish, next, and here comes the password which you have set. You just have to write in the password. As I know that I have kept it 1234, and when you click on this check button, it should turn the status into green, that is successfully connected, which means the password which you have set for your server is connected successfully with the workbench. If it doesn't turn green, which means the password is incorrect. So as I've kept it, I'll click on check and you can see the connection has been successfully done. So if I go on next and execute, all the scripts, all the backend things will be executed for me and everything will be installed over here. So let me finish it off. Next, finish. And now my MySQL Workbench is ready, where I can see lots of things installed in my MySQL software. Now, this is a GUI. Workbench is something where you will get the client access. Now, what is a client access? Where your data will be stored with respect to server, as well as you will be able to write the queries over here. So, client and server, both the architecture is being given into the MySQL Workbench. So, MySQL Workbench at a very basic level will have local instance, where it will create some local file, a folder which is there. You can see the root ID, the username over here is root, the password, the server connection is localhost over here. Now, there are lots of options over here. Here you can see a home button. It will ultimately help us to reach at home. When I go on this, as you can see, multiple tables seems to be connected with each other. Now, as you can see, Sakila as a database. When we install samples and examples, MySQL gives you a sample database named as Sakila, which will have lots of tables pre-installed into it, so that if you want to start understanding SQL, if you want to start querying your database, you can directly go without creating it as such. So here you can see this has been created. If I open it, this is how it looks. And this is what a relational database is. As we discussed during RDBMS, the R in RDBMS stands for relational. As you can see in the diagram, all the tables seems to be what related to each other. So that's how a relational database looks like. We will be creating one for us, but this is a pre-created one. So just wanted to show the meaning of relational is shown over here, that multiple tables are related to each other, where all the information is not stored in one table, but they are bifurcated into tables, and with the help of relation it is shown that each of them are related to each other. So I can go on the home page again from here, and you can see lots of options available for here in terms of migration. Now I don't want to do any migration, so let's go on the home page again. Now let's go on this dolphin icon. You can see there are multiple connections which I could create. Now I can click on this plus icon. It will help me to create one more connection, one more instance like this. Now instance will be some kind of folder which you will be creating. Later on, when we study a user ID and user interface or user privileges one, we will also see how we can create with certain different limitations over here. But if you can see, I'm creating a connection name named as SQL Masterclass. So I've created an SQL Masterclass. I'm not changing anything over here. Let the host be same, let the port be same, let the user be same. Now I'll go store and vault. I'll click over here, password, the password which we have set, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll do OK. I'll do test connection. When the test connection is done, you can see the connection has been made successfully with the MySQL server, which means when I write certain queries, it will take the data from the server and give me the required response. I'll do OK, and let's do OK. So here you can see a new instance has been created. This is how easy a new instance creation is. Now let me click on this. I can open it. Now it's okay, you can directly open from the local instance as well as you can open it from here. Now this is a GUI, a graphic user interface, which means it's a platform where a user can write. It is giving the privileges for user to write the SQL statements according to the requirements or the requisite which are required by the user for the data. Now you can see this, there are tabs just like file tab, edit, view, query, database, server, tools, scripting, help. We will be analyzing all the tabs one by one, and we will be using certain of the options at certain of the instances when we will be working on the further parts. Now, if you can see file tab, it has all things related to opening a file, creating a new file, or opening a script, closing a tab, and so on. Here you have edit, where when you want to do certain editing changes, you could do possibly over here. There is a view button in terms of giving the home, panels, and so on. So if you want to hide the sidebar, it will help us to hide the sidebar. Now here, if you don't want to hide the sidebar, you can show a sidebar over here. So that shortcuts are also available in these three options. That is, when you click on this, it will be gone. When you click on this, the below section would be gone. And when you click on this, the beside section would be gone. So this is how you can do over here. Now in the query, there are lots of options in query as well, which we will see eventually. Database, connecting to database, refreshing it, reversing a schema, server status. Now you have to be connected with your server. If I go with the server status, you can see your server status must be on. Let me remove this. Your server status must be on and running if you're working, if your data is being there, and if you're writing certain queries. It should not show an unconnected file. So let me close this. So server is there. So lots of options related to servers, like say data import, data export to the server, and so on. That will be possibly shown to us. After server, you can see there is an option of tools. It will give me lots of utilities in terms of backup and so on. There is scriptum option as well as there is help. In the help, you can reach to lots of documentation of Workbench, lots of blogs, lots of forums, or the website where you can get certain helps related to queries, related to errors, and so on. So you can see there are small icons which are also doing some of the other tasks. If I click on this small icon, it will give me a new SQL script. Now SQL script is a new file where I can write another query as such. You can click on this and you can get it over here. If I click on this, it will ask me to open the SQL files which are there. So it will go to my platform, it will go to my browser, and it will ask me, do you want to open certain SQL files? I don't have as such now, but if there is, it will show me the option of those. Now, if you can go, it will give me the inspect option which is there, but nothing is being created as such. So inspect is fine. Now, a new database could be created from here. Table, view, procedures, and many things could be created. This is a reconnect to database, which means if the connectivity is lost or if you want to refresh something, you can reconnect to database. Now you can see there is administration, there is schema. So in the administration, there are lots of options which are still available for us. Server status, users and privileges, data import, data export, startup, shutdown, dashboard, performance reports, and so on. I can go on schemas. Now what is schema? Schema is nothing but a representation of my data or logical representation of my database or the information or the values or the objects of data which is being stored. Now you can see, as I've said, Sakila is a by default database given to me. If I click on this, you can see there are 4 bifurcations created within Sakila. If you click on this, there are multiple tables being created. If you click on this, there are multiple columns, indexes, foreign keys as such. And if you click on this, this is a column name which is shown. Now, you can see this is how the data is being represented, and lots of options are pre-created, pre-available to us in terms of this. Now, there is SYS as a database, which is a system database which we can see. Now there is Word as a database, and there are related data in this. So when we did sample documentation, samples and examples, this all things have been installed into my MySQL part. Now in the query 1 and query 2, there are tabs which are available. From here also you can have an option of open. Now you can have an option of saving the script from here. You have an option of running a script, running an entire script. I'll show the difference between this two both. There is explaining the command, what you have done. Now here there is stop the query being executed, which means whatever is running, you want to stop it. So that's there. Here you have lots of options of toggling the scripts wherever are there. Now commit, rollback, and here you can see auto commit mode you want to toggle about. Now limit 1000 rows, which means in the outcome it will limit for 1000 rows. If you don't want any limit, so don't limit as such. And here you can see save the current statement. That is whatever you have written, you want to save it. Now beautify as an option is there, and this is an option which is used to find certain things in the editor option. So there are various options which are possibly available for us in terms of writing SQL. Now let's start with very basic things in terms of my SQL, and let's write certain basic queries. Let's see my server is responding or not, or is it providing me certain answers or not. As I have said, SQL is a language which will be written into my MySQL software, and SQL is derived from an English language. So the terminologies, the terms, the keywords will be very similar to the English language which you use. Now, this is the database. Now, unless and until I select any database, it will not proceed further in terms of giving me certain responses. So, some or the other database needs to be selected. So, how will I select some or the other database? One thing I can go over here is go on the database name and double click on it. When you can see the database name is in bold format, which means this database is being selected. So whatever queries I write will be pushed or will be asked or will be requested from this database onto my server. If I want to select this database, I just have to double click on the same. If I want to select this Word as a database, I just want to double click on it. You can see schema which is selected is Word. Now, we know that this is a shortcut option in order to select a database. But what is SQL option in order to do it? Let's write this. Now, before writing the query, let me help you to understand something called as comments. Now, what are comments? Comments are nothing but some lines, some instruction which you want to note down. But this will not be for your SQL to understand. It is just for making your query, making your request, or making your statements of SQL informative. That is adding more information to your queries, but nothing for the computer or my system or my server to understand. It is just for the user understanding. So that's a comment. So the way to write it is also differently. I'll write a hash, which is very similar to the Python comments which we do. Now, I'll write, I want to use what? Sakila database. So I want to use Sakila database. Let's say my database selected over here is world. I want to use Sakila database. Now that's a question, or that's a part which I want to do. I know that I can double click on it and easily select it. But what should I do? If I zoom in a bit, you could be able to see what I have written. So I'll just write use. Now as you can see, SQL is not case sensitive. What is the meaning of not being case sensitive? That is, you write all things in uppercase, you write all things in lowercase. If you toggle the case and write, there is no impact being into my outcome or the understanding of SQL. SQL is not case sensitive, which means it doesn't matter how you write, but you should write it correctly. That's the only thing which matters to SQL. Now I write use. Use what? I cannot write use database because I know I will be using a database. So no need to tell my SQL that I am using a database. It knows that database would be used. So I'll write use and the database name. Now let's say the name which I have written, it's incorrect. Now this is a client where I have written the query. This is incorrect. If I want to execute, what I can do is select it. And here you can see execute the statement under the cursor. Whatever is the cursor, it will execute. Now when it is executing, can you see this window? This is an output window being shown. What it is showing you? Use Salika, that is unknown database Salika. It's not about writing things in uppercase or lowercase, but it is about writing things in a correct manner. Salika as a database is not there. So when I send this request to the server, it has executed the query and it has given me a response. What is the response? That unknown database Salika. Because it's not there. If it would have been there, it will give me a response. Yes, it's being selected. So what is the database name which I have? Sakila. I will no need to select it and run it again and again. What you can do is you can keep your cursor anywhere in the query and run this. You can see when you executed it, this was the request being passed and this is the response being given. Use Sakila affected, and you can see it has been given into the bold format. When you get to know that the database is selected, that when you see that it's in bold format. So this is a database which is now being selected and now being used. So according to the first part, I saw how to give request to my server and how the server will understand the request and it will give me the response. So after this, let me show you one more way to write the comment. You can write a comment in hash or you can write a comment in this manner. That is 2 hyphen and space. This is also another way of writing comments specifically with MySQL. So here you can see MySQL not with respect to Python. In Python you don't write comment like this. In Python you write comment with hash. So here double hyphen space. In this I'll write show all the tables in the Sakila database. Now this is a query which I want to do. This is a query which I want to request from the server and I want to get the response. of all the tables which are stored in Sakila as a database. Now, when I have written this in the form of comment, you can see the comments which are being shown. Both of them are not for SQL to understand, SQL for execute. It is for me as a human to understand that what is the purpose of the statement which I have written. So show all the tables in Sakila database. It's telling me that this is what I'm finding. In order to do it, now you can see it's derived from an English word. So it will also write show what? What do you want to show? You want to show the tables. Show tables, which is there. Now when I have written this, you can see there is an error. What's an error? Show is not valid at this position, expecting end of the statement. Now what it is expecting? This is response number 1. This is response number 2. In order to show that both the responses are different from each other, we have to break down the responses or the statements which are there. So this is one request which will give me one response. This is another request which will give me another response. So I need to break down this request into 2 particular statements. So how do we break down? We terminate the query. That is, we end the query. So how do we end the query? We just write a semicolon. So when I write the semicolon, you can see the error over here is gone, which means the query has been terminated. So now this query is separate and this query is also separate. So when I put up a semicolon over here and I execute it, I can run it and I can execute it from here as we have seen, or else there is also a shortcut key to do it. Control and enter. So if you want to select and do it from here, you can. Do it from here, you can. But if you want to use a shortcut key, you can just use control and enter for the same. So as you can see, the request which I have given, the request for that server from the Sakila database was show tables. As we have selected Sakila, so all the tables which are being given is from the Sakila database. So this is how you can see the simplest queries, the simplest request would be given to the server where the data is being stored and the responses are also being provided. You can see the outputs over here, that whether the response is accepted or whether the response is showing an error, whether the response is given as an output, and so on. So this was all about the installation of MySQL, its quick user interface and certain basic implementation of queries which we saw. So that's all from my end with respect to this video.